Hi guys, it's me again. Now, in my first video, I did the theory on everything basically, 4 dimensions. My first video, which was called The Fourth Dimension Explained. Now that I've done that video, this theory that I'm coming up with, it needs to live and die many lives like humans do. So my theory is not perfect from the beginning, but it needs to evolve in order to become something real, basically. So what's happening with my theory is evolving out of the 0th and the 1st dimension. The theory is evolving out of that dimension, which exists in here, information. So I have a universe of information in my mind, and out of that is going to be some kind of a creation here. And so what I wanted to do is talk a little bit more about the 0th and the 1st dimension and how they work together. And I also want to talk a little bit about the traditional view of the dimensions. So by the way, I'll make this quick. The traditional view of the dimensions is that this line is the 1st dimension. You can only go forwards and backwards. It's a flat plane. They say that the 2nd dimension gives you up and down. So you can go forward and backward and up and down, but still no depth. Then they say that the 3rd dimension gives you depth. How that works is this series of dots right here just gets connected. Once all these dots are connected in every you get depth. Forgive me, I'm not the greatest artist drawing things. These are not the dimensions. It's an interesting idea, but these are just different states of the 2nd dimension. So that's what we have to do with that theory. That theory is old. We have to come up with a new theory. So I'd like to show you guys how the 0th and the 1st dimension were able to create the 2nd dimension. So you have the 0th and the 1st dimension here. This is a lot like this idea. So here you have the 0th and the 1st dimension. Not much can go on. You can only go between the 0 and the 1, and that's it. And so in the beginning, there was nothing. But then, with the introduction of another 0 and a 1. Now, how the other 0 and 1 showed up, now that's for the astronomers in Harvard University to figure out, okay? But what happened now is that now you don't have just this direction of travel anymore. You can actually go from 0 to 0, and then from 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 to 0 to 1 to 1 to 0 to 1 to 0 to 0 to 0 to 0 to 0. And now we are able to create the 2nd dimension. And if you guys want to know what this is, and it gets more complex, because then this happens. And then you can really get moving between all the 1s and 0s. Now we can make really fast, complex combinations. But there is something here that is mystery. And the other thing is too, is just coincidentally, this happens to be the aerial view of a pyramid. And by the way, if you just try this is actually a three-dimensional shape. You can see a three-dimensional shape here, can't you? It's pointing at you, right? And so that's interesting. Now it's a two-dimensional shape, right? We've lost our other 1 and 0. There we go. Now we're back to the third dimension. So, first of all, what we need to know is this mysterious fourth dimension that we're looking for is not the fourth dimension. It's actually the third dimension that we think we live in, and we don't. We live in the second dimension, and we have a viewpoint where we can look at the second dimension from the third dimension, okay? So what I want to show you with this piece of paper here is that this is a flat surface, and you can see that, okay? Now, if I do this, okay, in a two-dimensional view, which is how you see, this is still a flat surface. If it wasn't for the light shining on it, you would not know that there was depth, and you would not know that this is a cylinder, okay? You would not be able to tell that without the light, okay? So what our eyes do is give us a view of the third dimension, but we only have two-dimensional power over the two-dimensional world, okay? So the two-dimensional world is the physical world. The zeroth and the first dimension are that magical process that happens in space that we've yet to discover. We need to learn a lot more about space before we can discover exactly how this works, but we can have faith that we know that this takes place in the universe and that this is the first steps in the creation of life. And so I just wanted to go through the zeroth, the first, and the second dimension a little bit. And then just to show you where we are separated from the third dimension. And then we can move into what is actually the fourth dimension, which is the human conscience. Because the three-dimensional world is experienced by many things. And I'll introduce you to one right now. This is Petunia. She's a cutie and we're just having a little nap. And Petunia is exactly the same as me. She is a two-dimensional being living in the two-dimensional, or living in the second dimension. Okay, but she has a three-dimensional view of the world. But what she doesn't have is she doesn't have my fourth dimensional view. Okay? So even though we are the same life form, there's something in here and something in here that makes us different. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the fourth dimension.